They were going to leave her behind, but the cowboy said, "I'll stay with her." The sun was already low when the group reached the old stopping place. It was nothing more than a flat piece of land beside a dusty trail, marked by a few broken fence posts and a dry water trough that had not held water in years. The horses were tired, their heads hanging low, and the people were even more exhausted. They had been traveling for days, moving faster than planned, pushed by fear, hunger, and the need to reach safety before nightfall. The woman sat a little apart from the others, leaning against a wagon wheel. Her face was pale and her breathing was slow and uneven. Every movement seemed to cost her effort. She had tried to stay strong during the journey, had tried not to complain, but her body had finally given up. The long days, the heat, and the lack of proper food had worn her down. Now she could barely stand without help. The rest of the group gathered near the horses, speaking in low voices. They thought she could not hear them, but the quiet of the open land carried every word. "She can't go on like this," one man said, shaking his head. "If we stay, we'll all be in danger." "We don't have the supplies," another added. "We were barely prepared for ourselves." Someone else sighed deeply. "Night is coming. If we don't move now, we might not make it to the next town." Their words were not cruel, but they were hard. Each person was thinking of survival. Fear made people practical, and practicality often sounded heartless. The woman closed her eyes. She had known this moment would come. She had seen the looks earlier in the day, felt the distance growing between her and the others as she slowed them down. She had heard the silence whenever she asked for a break. No one had said it out loud until now, but she understood. She was the reason they might not survive. She thought of standing up and telling them to go without her, to make it easier for everyone. But when she tried to move, pain ran through her body, sharp and sudden. She stayed where she was, her hands shaking slightly in her lap. Memories filled her mind as she waited. She remembered other times she had been left behind in life, moments when people decided she was too much trouble, too weak, or too slow. She had learned not to beg. She had learned to accept things quietly. Still, knowing something and feeling it were very different. Her chest felt tight and she swallowed hard to keep her emotions from showing. A few steps away, a cowboy stood listening. He had been quiet the entire journey, keeping to himself, doing his share of the work without complaint. He was not a man who spoke often, but when he did, people usually listened. He leaned against his horse, arms crossed, eyes fixed on the ground. The dust clung to his boots and clothes, showing how far he had traveled with them. He looked toward the woman. He noticed the way she kept her head down, as if trying to disappear. He saw how alone she looked, even though she was surrounded by people. Something about that stayed with him. The group's discussion grew more serious. "We can leave her some water," one person suggested, not meeting anyone's eyes. "And food, someone might come this way." "That's a risk," another replied. "But staying is a bigger one." No one spoke for a moment after that. The decision seemed made without being said. Saddles were adjusted. A few people began checking their gear, avoiding looking at the woman by the wagon. She opened her eyes and watched them quietly. She did not cry. She did not shout. She only felt tired, deeper than she had ever felt before. Tired of walking, tired of hoping, tired of being strong. If this was where her journey ended, she would face it the same way she faced everything else, silently. The cowboy straightened slowly. He took a few steps forward, then stopped. He could feel the weight of the moment pressing on him. He understood the danger. Staying behind meant uncertainty. It meant possibly losing everything he had worked for, but leaving her behind felt worse. He cleared his throat. The sound cut through the quiet and several heads turned toward him. "She's not going to make it alone," he said simply. One of the men frowned. "That's why we have to move now." The cowboy shook his head. "No, that's why someone has to stay." There was a pause, as if no one understood what he meant. "I'll stay with her," he continued, his voice calm but firm. The reaction was immediate. Some people stared at him in disbelief. Others began talking all at once. "You can't be serious. That's foolish. You'll die out here." He listened to them without interrupting. When they finished, he spoke again. "I won't leave her behind," he said. "If you're going, go, but I'm staying." The woman looked up then, surprised. She had not expected anyone to speak for her, least of all him. Their eyes met briefly, and she saw something steady there. No pity, no fear, just certainty. The group tried one last time to change his mind. They reminded him of the risks, the long distance to help, the unknown dangers of the land at night. They told him he owed her nothing. He did not argue. He only repeated his decision. In the end, survival won. One by one, they mounted their horses. No one met the woman's eyes as they left supplies beside her. The sound of hooves grew softer as the group rode away until only silence remained. The cowboy stayed where he was, watching the dust settle on the empty trail. Then he turned toward her. "We'll figure this out," he said quietly. She nodded, unable to speak. For the first time in days, she did not feel completely alone. As the sky darkened and the first stars appeared, two people remained in a place meant to be forgotten. One because she could not go on, and the other because he chose not to leave. Night came slowly, as if the land itself was unsure what would happen next. The sky turned from orange to deep blue, and a cool wind moved across the open ground. The woman pulled her thin shawl tighter around her shoulders. The cowboy noticed at once and quietly walked to the wagon. He took out an extra blanket and handed it to her without saying much. "Thank you," she whispered. Her voice was weak but steady. He nodded and began preparing a small fire. He moved with calm purpose, collecting dry wood and shielding the flame from the wind. Soon, a gentle glow filled the space between them. The fire did not give much warmth, but it was enough to push back the darkness and fear. They sat in silence for a while. The sounds of the night slowly replaced the noise of the group that had left: soft wind, distant animals, the crackle of burning wood. The woman watched the flames, her thoughts heavy. "I didn't think anyone would stay," she said finally. The cowboy poked the fire with a stick. "Someone had to." She studied his face in the firelight. He looked tired but not unsure. There was a quiet strength in the way he carried himself, as if he had made peace with hard choices long ago. "You didn't have to," she said. He looked at her then. "I know." The words were simple, but they meant more than she expected. She looked away, unsure how to respond. For the first time since she fell ill, she felt a small sense of relief, mixed with guilt. His choice had saved her from being alone, but it had also put him in danger. As the night grew colder, her condition worsened. Her breathing became shallow and a dull pain spread through her body. The cowboy noticed immediately. He knelt beside her, placing a hand near her forehead, careful and respectful. "You're burning up," he said. He searched through the supplies left behind and found a small bottle of water and a cloth. He soaked the cloth and gently placed it on her forehead. The simple care surprised her. No one had looked after her like this in a long time. "Try to rest," he said. Sleep did not come easily. She drifted in and out, her thoughts mixed with memories and worry. Each time she stirred, she saw him nearby, adding wood to the fire or checking on her. He did not complain. He did not rush. He stayed. By morning, the land looked different. The light revealed how empty the place truly was. No buildings, no roads, just endless ground stretching in every direction. The woman's heart sank when she realized how far help might be. The cowboy stood and stretched, his joints stiff from sleeping on the hard ground. He handed her some water. "Drink slowly," he said. She did, grateful for every small sip. When she finished, she tried to sit up on her own, but her strength failed her. He gently helped her lean back. "I'm sorry," she said, tears forming in her eyes. "I'm slowing you down." "You're not slowing anything," he replied. "We're right where we are." The words comforted her more than she expected. She nodded, wiping her eyes. She did not want to cry in front of him, but the fear had been building for days, and now it finally found a way out. Later that morning, he decided to check the area. He told her he would not go far. She watched as he walked away, her chest tight with worry. Every minute felt long, but he returned, carrying a small bundle of dry plants and a hopeful look. "There's a creek not too far," he said. "It's low, but it's water." Her eyes widened. "Really?" He smiled slightly. "Really." With careful planning, he made several trips to bring back water. He boiled it over the fire, making sure it was safe. He shared what little food they had left, dividing it fairly. He never ate before making sure she had enough. As the hours passed, they talked more. Not deep conversations at first, just simple words to pass time. She learned he had been traveling for years, never staying in one place too long. He learned she had been trying to reach family she had not seen in a long time. "I didn't want to be a burden," she said quietly. "That's why I pushed myself." He nodded. "Sometimes pushing too hard does more harm than good." She smiled weakly. "You sound like you've learned that the hard way." He didn't answer right away. Then he said, "Most things worth knowing come that way." As afternoon turned to evening, her condition improved slightly. She could sit up longer. Her breathing steadied. It wasn't a full recovery, but it was enough to bring hope. That night the wind picked up and dark clouds rolled in. A storm came suddenly, rain falling hard and fast. The cowboy quickly covered the supplies and shielded her as best he could. The rain soaked them both, but neither complained. When the storm passed, the land smelled fresh. The fire was gone, but the air felt cleaner. The woman looked at the sky, stars slowly returning. "I thought being left behind meant the end," she said softly, "but you stayed." He looked at the horizon. Sometimes the end is just the start of something else. She didn't fully understand his words, but she felt their truth. As she lay back, wrapped in blankets, she realized something had changed inside her. She was no longer waiting to be abandoned. She was surviving. And nearby, the cowboy sat quietly, watching over her, knowing his choice had already changed both their lives, whether the world ever knew it or not. The days that followed moved slowly, each one shaped by small tasks and quiet effort. Morning light always came gently, spreading across the open land and waking them with soft warmth. The woman's strength returned little by little. She could now sit up on her own, and sometimes she managed to stand for a short while. Every step still felt heavy, but it no longer felt impossible. The cowboy kept a steady routine. At dawn, he checked the fire and gathered wood. He walked to the creek to bring back water, careful not to leave her alone for long. He showed her how to sip slowly, reminding her not to rush. When she grew tired, he helped her rest without making her feel weak or helpless. She noticed how patient he was. He never looked at the sky with anger or complained about the land. He accepted things as they were and worked with what he had. That calm presence slowly settled into her own thoughts, easing the fear that had lived inside her for so long. One afternoon, while the sun rested high above them, she watched him repair a broken strap on his saddle. His hands moved with skill, worn from years of work. She realized then how little she knew about him, even though he had done so much for her. "Why did you stay?" she asked quietly. He paused, then continued working. "I couldn't walk away," he said after a moment. "I've done that before, it never sits right." She waited, sensing there was more. When he finished the strap, he looked up. "There was a time I needed help," he said, "and no one stayed." Her heart tightened. She understood without asking questions. Pain did not always need explaining. Sometimes it lived clearly in the spaces between words. As the days passed, she began helping in small ways. She sorted supplies, prepared simple meals, and kept the fire going while he was away. These small actions made her feel useful again. She was no longer just someone being cared for. She was part of the effort to survive. They talked more in the evenings, sitting close to the fire as the sky darkened. She shared stories of her childhood, of places she once dreamed of seeing. He spoke of long roads, hard winters, and nights spent under open skies. Their words were simple, but each story built trust, like stones placed carefully to form a path. One night, she admitted something she had never said out loud. "I've always been afraid of being left behind," she said. "Not just here, everywhere." He listened quietly. "Being left doesn't mean you don't matter," he said. "Sometimes it just means others were too afraid to stay." Those words stayed with her long after the fire burned low. Her health continued to improve. She began walking short distances each day, leaning on a stick he had carved for her. Each step felt like a victory. She laughed the first time she made it to the edge of the creek, surprised by her own strength. "You did that," he said, smiling. "No," she replied. "We did." The land around them began to feel less empty. They noticed birds returning and wild flowers blooming where rain had fallen. It was as if the world was slowly reminding them that life could grow even in forgotten places. One afternoon, they spotted riders far in the distance. The woman's heart raced, hope and fear mixed together. The cowboy stood beside her, shielding his eyes as he watched. "They're too far," he said finally. "But it means the trail's not forgotten." She nodded. The idea of help no longer felt urgent. She trusted that somehow things would work out. That night she slept deeply for the first time in weeks. Her dreams were calm, filled with light instead of fear. When she woke, she realized something important had changed. She no longer felt like someone waiting to be saved. She felt like someone living again. The cowboy noticed it too. Her voice was stronger. Her eyes held confidence. She stood taller. "You're ready to move soon," he said one morning. She looked at the horizon, then back at him. "Yes," she said, "but not alone." He nodded, understanding. They packed slowly, careful not to rush. There was no fear now, only quiet determination. Whatever waited ahead, they would face it together. As they prepared to leave the place where their lives had shifted, the woman looked around one last time. What once felt like a place of abandonment now felt like a beginning. She smiled softly. "Thank you," she said. He simply tipped his hat. "You're welcome." And with that, they stepped forward, carrying strength they never knew they had found in each other. They did not leave all at once. The morning they decided to move, the air felt different, heavier somehow, as if the land itself was watching. The woman packed slowly, folding the blanket with care, placing each small item back into the bag. Her hands were steadier now. She could stand without help, though she still moved carefully. Every step reminded her how close she had come to being left behind forever. The cowboy checked the horse and adjusted the saddle. He kept glancing toward her, not out of doubt but out of habit. Watching over her had become part of his rhythm. When she finally walked over on her own, he gave a small nod, proud but not surprised. "We'll take it slow," he said. She smiled. "I know." They followed the trail cautiously, stopping often. The land stretched wide and quiet around them. The sun was warm but not harsh. Birds flew overhead and the breeze carried the smell of grass and damp earth. It felt like the world was opening again, one careful step at a time. By midday, the woman's legs trembled with effort. She did not complain, but the cowboy noticed. He suggested resting beneath a large tree that stood alone in the field. They shared water and sat in silence, listening to the wind move through the leaves. "I used to think strength meant never stopping," she said softly. He shook his head. "Strength is knowing when to stop." She thought about that as they rested. In the past, she had always pushed herself too hard, afraid that slowing down would make people leave her behind. Now, resting did not feel like weakness. It felt like respect for herself. As afternoon came, clouds gathered in the distance. The sky darkened and the air grew cool. The cowboy studied the horizon. "A storm's coming," he said. They had little shelter, but they moved quickly, guided by instinct and shared understanding. They found a low ridge where rocks formed a partial cover. The rain arrived fast, pounding the ground and soaking the land. Thunder rolled in the distance. The woman sat close, pulling her coat tighter. The cowboy positioned himself so the wind hit his back instead of hers. The rain was cold, but the moment felt strange and calm. They had faced worse together. "I'm not afraid anymore," she said quietly, surprised by her own words. He looked at her. "Neither am I." When the storm passed, the world felt new. The ground glistened and the sky cleared slowly. A faint rainbow appeared far away, soft and almost hidden. The woman stared at it, her eyes filling with quiet wonder. "I almost didn't get to see this," she said. "But you did," he replied. They continued on until evening, reaching a small settlement just as the lamps were being lit. People moved about, unaware of how close two lives had come to breaking apart. The woman hesitated at the edge of the road. So many times before, places like this had marked endings. She had arrived alone, tired, unwanted. This time was different. The cowboy walked beside her, steady and calm. When someone offered help, he let her speak for herself. He stood back, allowing her strength to be seen. She noticed that, and it meant more than words. They were given food and a place to rest. As she sat at a table with warm soup before her, the woman felt something unfamiliar: safety. Not because someone was protecting her, but because she trusted herself again. Later that night, she stepped outside. The stars were bright above the quiet town. The cowboy joined her, leaning against a post. "You'll be okay from here," he said. She turned to him. "I know, but I don't want this to be goodbye." He looked surprised, then thoughtful. "Neither do I." They talked long into the night, not about plans, but about choices. About how one decision could change everything. About staying when it would be easier to leave. In the days that followed, the woman grew stronger. She helped where she could, earning her place without forcing herself. People noticed her kindness, her steady determination. The past no longer defined her. The cowboy watched her from a distance sometimes, feeling something shift inside him. He had spent years moving on, never staying long enough to build roots. Now the idea of leaving felt heavy. One evening she found him packing his saddle. "You're not leaving yet," she said, her voice calm but certain. He paused. "I was thinking about it." She stepped closer. "Stay." The word was simple, but it carried everything they had been through. He looked at her for a long moment, then set the saddle down. "All right," he said. The woman smiled, not out of relief, but out of trust. What had begun as survival had become something deeper. They had walked through fear, faced the edge of abandonment, and chosen connection instead. The road ahead was still uncertain, but they were no longer afraid of it. They had learned that sometimes staying was the bravest thing of all. The morning came softly, like it did on the open land, but this time the sound of quiet life surrounded them. Doors opened, footsteps crossed the road, and smoke rose from small chimneys. The woman woke early, feeling rested in a way she had not felt for a long time. Her body still remembered the weakness, but it no longer controlled her. She sat up, took a deep breath, and smiled. Outside, the cowboy was already awake. He stood near the fence, watching the sun climb. When he heard her step out, he turned. "Morning," he said. "Morning," she replied. They stood together in silence, comfortable and unhurried. There was no rush to move on, no fear pushing them forward. The world felt open again, full of choices instead of limits. Over the next days, the woman began to build a routine. She helped where she could, offering her time and effort without pushing herself too far. She learned when to rest and when to work, listening to her body instead of fighting it. People noticed her steady nature and kind words. Slowly, she became part of the place, not as someone in need, but as someone who belonged. The cowboy stayed too. At first, he told himself it was only for a short while, just long enough to be sure she was truly safe. But each day made leaving harder. He repaired fences, helped with horses, and shared meals with others. At night, he found himself talking and laughing more than he had in years. One evening, as the sun faded, the woman sat beside him near the fence. "Do you ever think about what would have happened if you hadn't stayed?" she asked. He nodded slowly. "Sometimes." "I do too," she said, "and I don't like that path." He looked at her. "Me neither." They understood each other without needing to say more. That moment on the empty land had changed everything. It was the point where fear had been replaced with choice. Weeks passed, and strength returned fully to the woman. She walked with confidence now, her steps sure. She laughed more easily. The shadow of being left behind no longer followed her. She had faced it and survived. The cowboy noticed the change, not just in her but in himself. He no longer felt the need to keep moving. For the first time, staying did not feel like being trapped. It felt like building something. One afternoon, a rider arrived with news from the trail. The group that had left them behind had reached safety after a difficult journey. Hearing this brought no anger, only quiet understanding. Everyone had done what they believed they had to do. Later that day, the woman and the cowboy walked to the edge of town, where the land opened wide once again. "This is where it happened," she said softly, thinking of that first terrible evening. He nodded. "And this is where it changed." She turned to him. "Thank you for staying, not just then, now." He smiled, a real smile, warm and honest. "Thank you for giving me a reason to." As time went on, the cowboy made his decision clear. He chose to stay, not out of duty but out of hope. He began planning a future that did not involve endless roads. The woman supported him, not as someone who needed saving but as an equal. They worked side by side, learning each other's strengths and limits. There were disagreements, quiet moments, and shared laughter. Nothing was perfect, but it was real. One evening, as the sky filled with stars, the woman spoke words she had carried inside for a long time. "I used to believe that being left behind meant I wasn't worth staying for," she said. "Now I know that's not true." He looked at her, his voice steady. "You were always worth staying for." She smiled, feeling the truth of it settle deep within her. Their story did not end with loud celebration or grand promises. It continued in small, meaningful ways: shared meals, steady work, quiet evenings. The kind of life built not on fear but on trust. Sometimes, when the wind crossed the land just right, the woman would remember that empty place and the moment she thought everything was over. And she would remember the cowboy's words, simple and strong: "I'll stay with her." Those words had changed her life. And in choosing to stay, he had changed his own. Together, they moved forward, not because they had to, but because they wanted to. And that choice made all the difference.